Okay, so this is where I think our code starts to get a little bit more interesting when we start to read user input, because so far our code has been very, and let me share a word with. So far our code has been very, and we talked about this a little bit in CMU for those of you who I spent some time talking with, static versus dynamic. So static means kind of like staying the same or not moving, whereas dynamic means changing, or maybe moving. Like, I don't know. I think in video games, like static defense would be something that can't move. I don't know. Like if you have like a gun turret or something, I don't know. That's like that's what I think of when I think of static. Something that can't move versus dynamic is something that's kind of moving around a little bit. So if you're, I don't know, playing some video game, you might have like static defenses versus dynamic defenses. Um, League of Legends would be like like those cannons, like the turrets or something like that is a static defense. It's not moving. Dynamic would be like the creep or something running around, whatever those things are called. Anyway, so far our code has been very, at least um, in our Java so far, our code has been very static because it doesn't ever change. It always just kind of does the same thing each time. But that's kind of like lame code, right? Because we want to do different things depending on what the user tells us to do. We want to make our code more dynamic. Like our goal is to be dynamic with our coding. So in our I think this is chapter 7 now. Chapter 7 is going to talk a little bit about making your code a little bit more dynamic. And the way that it's going to do that is by reading user input. So like right now, you as the programmer are typing in all the calculations, but that's not really like how a program should work. Like if a calculator can only like I buy my calculator and it just adds 2 plus 3, that's all it does. I can't change anything. Like probably that's not a great calculator. So we want to take user input and then make calculations based on that. And we're going to use that using scanners. So let's see, a couple things in here. Scanners are not naturally included in Java. So Java does not, like, it doesn't come with those. But the good thing is, like Java and like many other coding, like every other coding language, is that you can import new things into Java. Like someone else has made something called a scanner, and they have made it available for you to use. So you can import this into your code and then use it. But we need to make sure that we are including that line in our text. So I think down here, maybe later on, we're going to be importing this thing. So this command is going to tell Java, hey, I know you don't have this available right now, but can you include this from like a list of programs? Yeah, and so this is a little bit like, so yeah. The way that we're going to run our scanner, so we're going to make a scanner called reader, and it's just going to use this same input every time. This is kind of like this, the public static void main thing, right? We're going to use this thing every time. Yeah, and then so this line is going to initiate or like create a scanner, and then when we actually want to use the scanner, we'll use this reader.nextLine command. So like we'll access the reader using .nextLine, and basically this is going to read input from the user, and then this naturally will always produce a string, but we can mess with that a little bit later. And we mess with it right here, right? This will, if we use this command, it will read from the user, and then it'll take whatever the user puts in and turn it into an integer, into a number. Okay. Yeah, and I think the rest of the stuff like hard coding, that's what we talked about. That's like static. Another word for it is like hard coding. We can't change it. We don't want static. We want dynamic. So I think I'll just do two quick things here. One, just basic using a scanner. So this is an example of code that we showed earlier. It's going to import in this tool, java.util.scanner. Like we don't need to know any of the details, but like how this works or where this comes from. Just we now get access to it. In here, we're going to create a scanner. We're going to call, its name is actually called reader. We need to use this all the time in order to get access to this tool. If we don't write this, the computer's not going to know what to do. And then down here is where we actually use the reader. So we're going to save a string called name, and we're going to set its value to be equal to whatever the user puts in. So this command will basically, when we run it in code, so I'll pop over to a little online IDE called Replit that I might use a little bit later on as we get into our course. It's basically like a what's called like Netbeans, but it's just online. So I typed all the stuff in here. We're going to type in a scanner, reader, blah, blah, blah. We're going to ask for the user's name, and let's just see like how this code runs. So we hit run, it's going to actually do this. It's going to say, what's your name? And then it's just going to sit there and wait. It's going to have this little kind of blank spot because it's waiting for your input. So that's where we've run this part in the code. We've run this part. And now we're sitting here waiting for the user to put in their name. If I put in my name, done. Now, it's probably kind of dumb, right? I don't want to just say my name. I could do something like print line. I'm going to say, hey, and then plus, and then we'll put in name. So we're taking the name here, and then we're actually going to reuse that information to actually print something. So we hit run, run. We type in Modin, boom, hey Modin, easy. So yeah, that's going to sit there and wait for it. And the last thing that I want to do here, if we go back to this, using reader input, we want to go down to reading integers. Because, like we talked about making a calculator, it's not really, we want to be able to take in all sorts of different inputs. Scanner by default is going to submit your number as a, actually, yeah, I'm going to make a quick other video so this doesn't get too long.